r/AmItheAsshole father-in-law called me worthless, so I exposed his secret gambling. AITA for exposing my father-in-law's gambling addiction after he called me worthless in front of the entire family? Maybe if you had any real education or came from a decent family, you'd understand why we're concerned about our son's future. The words hit me like a slap across the face, and the entire dining room went silent. 23 people, aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, all staring at me while my father-in-law Richard sat back in his chair with that smug smile I'd grown to hate over the past 2 years. My husband Jake looked down at his plate, saying nothing. Again. "Richard, that's enough," my mother-in-law whispered, but her voice was barely audible. "No, Linda, someone needs to say it." Richard's voice grew louder, more confident. "We've all been thinking it. She's dragging him down. Look at her, she can't even afford a decent dress for family dinner." I was wearing a navy blue dress from Target that I thought looked nice. It was clean, modest, and the best I could do on my teacher's salary while Jake finished his residency. But apparently, not having a designer label made me trailer trash in Richard's eyes. "I work hard for everything I have," I managed to say, my voice shaking. Richard laughed, actually laughed. "Hard work? You teach elementary school. That's not a career, that's a hobby. My son is going to be a surgeon, and he's tied down to someone who will never be able to contribute anything meaningful to this family." The room was so quiet I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Jake's cousin Sarah was recording something on her phone under the table. His Aunt Margaret had her hand over her mouth in shock. And my husband, the man who promised to love and protect me, was cutting his steak like nothing was happening. "She's worthless, Jake," Richard continued, his voice cold and matter-of-fact. "And the sooner you realize that, the better off you'll be." That's when something inside me snapped. For 8 months, I'd endured his comments about my cheap apartment, my discount clothes, my mediocre job. I'd smiled politely when he introduced me to his golf buddies as Jake's little phase. I'd bitten my tongue when he told people at parties that I was temporary. I'd even convinced myself that once Jake finished his residency and we were more established, things would get better. But looking around that table at all those faces, some sympathetic, some uncomfortable, some actually nodding in agreement with Richard, I realized things were never going to get better. Not unless I made them better. "You know what, Richard?" I said, standing up slowly. Every eye in the room turned to me. "You're right. I'm not perfect. I don't have money or a trust fund or a family business handed down through generations." Richard's smile widened, thinking he'd won. "But at least I don't have to steal from my own company to fund my poker habit." The smile disappeared from his face instantly. Linda dropped her fork with a loud clatter. Jake's head snapped up to look at me for the first time all evening, his eyes wide with panic. "What did you just say?" Richard's voice was dangerous now, but I was past caring. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone, my hands surprisingly steady for someone whose heart was beating so fast I thought it might explode. "Should I start with the screenshots of your casino rewards account, or would you prefer I begin with the photos of the forged withdrawal slips?" The color drained from Richard's face so fast I thought he might faint. Around the table, confused murmurs started rippling through the family as they tried to process what I'd just said. "You're bluffing," Richard said, but his voice cracked on the last word. I swiped to the first screenshot on my phone, a photo I'd taken 3 weeks ago when I borrowed Jake's laptop to grade papers and found Richard's email still logged in. Jake had asked me to print some medical journals for him, and that's when I saw the casino promotional emails. Dozens of them. "Golden Rivers Casino," I read aloud, my voice carrying clearly in the silent room. "Congratulations, Mr. Morrison. You've reached Platinum Elite status. Your complimentary suite and dining credits are ready for your next visit." Linda made a small choking sound. "Richard, what is she talking about?" "She's lying," Richard snapped, but sweat was beading on his forehead now. "She's making this up because she's embarrassed. This is exactly the kind of trashy behavior I'd expect from someone like her." "Someone like me?" I laughed, and the sound was sharper than I intended. "You mean someone who doesn't embezzle from their own business to pay gambling debts?" That's when Jake finally found his voice. "Emma, stop. Whatever you think you know. I know that your father has been forging withdrawal authorizations from Morrison Construction for the past 6 months," I cut him off. "I know he's lost over $200,000 at 3 different casinos. And I know that the emergency business expenses he's been telling your mother about are actually cash advances he's taking to cover his losses." The room erupted. Richard's brother David, who was a partner in the construction business, shot to his feet so fast his chair toppled backward. "Richard, tell me she's lying," David demanded. "Tell me right now that you haven't been stealing from the company." "I haven't stolen anything," Richard shouted, but his eyes were darting around the room like a trapped animal. "It's temporary. It's all temporary borrowing that I was going to pay back." The admission hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Linda started crying, not quiet tears, but big, gasping sobs that shook her entire body. Jake's grandmother, the family matriarch, was staring at Richard with a look of pure disgust. "How much?" David's voice was deadly quiet. Richard opened and closed his mouth several times before answering. "It's not as bad as she's making it sound. Maybe 50, 60,000. Try 237,000, I said, reading from another screenshot. "That's just from the Morrison Construction account. Should I tell them about the second mortgage you took out on the beach house without telling Linda?" Linda's sobs turned into a wail. "The beach house? Richard, you promised me that house was paid off." I felt a sick satisfaction watching Richard's perfect little world crumble around him, but it was immediately followed by a wave of nausea. Jake was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before, not anger, not gratitude, but something that looked almost like fear. "You've been going through my emails," he said quietly. "You've been spying on my family." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. After everything his father had put me through, after months of abuse and humiliation, Jake was making me the villain. "Your father called me worthless," I whispered. "In front of everyone. And you said nothing. So you decided to destroy him?" I looked around the table at the chaos I'd unleashed. Richard was arguing with David in harsh whispers. Linda was being comforted by 2 of her sisters. Half the family was staring at me with shock, the other half with something that looked suspiciously like admiration. And my husband was looking at me like I was a stranger. You know what, Jake? I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Maybe I am a stranger to you. Because the woman you married wouldn't have sat there and taken that abuse for 8 months while her husband did nothing. Jake's face flushed red. That's not fair. You know how complicated. Complicated? I laughed bitterly. What's complicated about standing up for your wife? Before Jake could respond, David slammed his fist on the table so hard the wine glasses jumped. 200,000, Richard? $200,000 of company money? I was going to pay it back. Richard insisted, but his voice was getting more desperate. I had a system, I was close to breaking even. That's what every gambling addict says, Jake's Aunt Margaret said quietly. She'd been silent until now, but her voice cut through the chaos like a knife. My first husband said the exact same thing before he lost our house. Richard whipped around to face her. I am not some degenerate gambler, Margaret. I made some investments that didn't pan out. Investments? I couldn't help myself. I swiped to another screenshot. Is that what you call royal flush jackpot poker, $15,000 loss at 2 in the morning on a Tuesday? Linda's crying intensified. You told me you were at business dinners. All those late nights, you said you were meeting with contractors. I was networking. Richard's voice cracked. The casino has high roller events, important people go there. Dad, just stop, Jake said, finally looking at his father with something resembling disappointment. But then he turned back to me, and the disappointment was still there. But Emma, going through private emails? Taking screenshots? That's a serious violation of privacy. I stared at him in disbelief. Your father just admitted to stealing from his own company, and you're worried about privacy? That's between him and David. It's family business. I am family. The words came out louder than I intended, echoing through the dining room. Or at least, I thought I was. But apparently I'm just some outsider who's supposed to sit here and smile while your father tells everyone how worthless I am. Jake's cousin Sarah, who'd been recording earlier, cleared her throat. Actually, Jake, I think Emma has every right to defend herself. Uncle Richard was way out of line. Thank you, Sarah, I said, grateful for any support. But Richard wasn't done. Even cornered, even exposed, he managed to find his voice again. Don't you dare try to turn my family against me, he snarled at me. You little gold digger. This is exactly what you wanted, isn't it? To cause drama, to split us apart so you can have Jake all to yourself. Gold digger? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I've never asked Jake for a penny. I pay my own rent, buy my own food. Because you're waiting for the big payoff when he becomes a surgeon, Richard continued, gaining confidence as he found a new angle of attack. You think we're stupid? You think we don't see through your act? That's when Linda surprised everyone. She stood up slowly, wiping her eyes, and walked around the table to stand beside me. Richard Morrison, she said, her voice shaking but clear. How dare you? This girl has been nothing but kind to our family, and you've treated her like garbage from day one. And now I find out you've been lying to me for months about money, about where you've been, about the house. Linda, please. No. Linda held up her hand. Just, no. I need you to leave. Tonight. Go stay at your brother's, or a hotel, or wherever you've been spending our money. But I don't want to see you right now. The silence that followed was deafening. Richard looked around the table, clearly expecting someone to come to his defense, but even his own mother was staring at her hands. Finally, he pushed back from the table and stood up. Fine. But this isn't over. He looked directly at me. You have no idea what you've started. The threat in Richard's voice sent chills down my spine, but I forced myself to meet his glare. Is that supposed to scare me? Because honestly, Richard, after 8 months of your abuse, I'm not sure what else you could possibly do to me. He leaned forward, his hands pressed against the table. You think you're so smart, don't you? Playing detective, collecting your little evidence. But you have no idea how deep this goes. What's that supposed to mean? Jake asked, and for the first time tonight, he sounded genuinely concerned. Richard's laugh was bitter. Ask your wife. She seems to know everything about our family business now. I felt my stomach drop. The truth was, I didn't know everything. The screenshots I'd found were damning, but I'd only scratched the surface. I'd been so focused on gathering enough evidence to defend myself that I hadn't fully investigated how far Richard's gambling had reached. The Patterson Project, David said suddenly, his face going pale. Richard, tell me the Patterson Project funds are still intact. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire about to snap. Richard, David's voice was deadly quiet now. The Patterson Project. 300,000 in escrow. Tell me right now that money is still there. Richard's jaw worked silently. Around the table, family members who'd been whispering fell completely silent. It's complicated, Richard finally said. Oh my God. David sank back into his chair. The Patterson Project is our biggest contract. If that money is gone. It's not gone. Richard snapped. It's just, temporarily unavailable. You used escrow funds? Jake's Uncle Tom spoke for the first time, his voice incredulous. Richard, that's not gambling, that's fraud. Federal fraud. My blood ran cold. I thought I was exposing a family secret, some dirty laundry that would finally put Richard in his place. I hadn't realized I was potentially exposing actual criminal activity. Jake was staring at his father with horror. Dad, please tell me you didn't touch client money. I had a sure thing, Richard said desperately. There was this poker tournament, high stakes, and I knew I could win it back. I was going to replace everything before the Patterson inspection next week. Next week? David shot to his feet again. The Patterson final inspection is in 3 days, Richard. 3 days. Linda made a strangled sound. How much? How much of their money did you take? Not all of it, Richard said quickly. Maybe half. A little more than half. 200,000, David said flatly. You gambled away $200,000 of client funds. I felt like I was watching a car accident in slow motion. This was so much worse than I'd imagined. I'd wanted to humiliate Richard, to make him face consequences for his cruelty. But this could destroy the entire family business. Emma, Jake turned to me, his face ashen. Did you know? About the Patterson money? No, I whispered. I swear, I had no idea it was this bad. But you knew enough to ruin him anyway. Jake's voice was getting louder. You knew this would come out once you started talking. I knew he was stealing from the company, I shot back. I thought your uncle deserved to know his partner was embezzling. So you decided to play judge and jury at a family dinner? Jake stood up, his hands shaking. Do you have any idea what you've done? This doesn't just hurt my father, Emma. This could destroy everyone. Uncle David could lose his business. The employees, their families. Don't you dare blame me for your father's choices. I stood up to face him. I didn't make him gamble. I didn't make him steal. All I did was refuse to sit there quietly while he called me worthless. You could have come to me privately, Jake said. We could have handled this as a family. Like you handled him calling me worthless? Like you handled 8 months of him treating me like garbage? My voice was getting shrill, but I couldn't stop myself. You've never once stood up for me, Jake. Not once. So forgive me if I decided to stand up for myself. Linda was crying again, but softer now, more broken. The house, she whispered. If this gets out, if there are legal problems, we could lose everything. Richard suddenly straightened, and I saw a flash of his old arrogance return. You all act like I'm some common criminal, he said. I made some bad investments, yes. But I'm not the real problem here. He pointed directly at me. She is. She's a virus that's infected this family from the moment Jake brought her around. Dad, stop, Jake said, but his voice lacked conviction. No, Jake, you need to hear this. Look around this table. Look at what she's done. Your mother is crying, your uncle is talking about bankruptcy, and your cousin is probably posting this all over social media. He gestured towards Sarah, who was still holding her phone. This girl has destroyed our family in one evening. I looked around the table and realized with growing horror that some people were nodding. Not everyone, but enough. Enough to make me wonder if Richard was right. Had I gone too far? The doubt crept in like poison, making my chest tight and my hands shake. Looking at Linda's tear-streaked face, at David's devastated expression, at the way even some of the younger cousins were staring at me with uncertainty, maybe Richard was right. Maybe I was the problem. Emma, Jake's grandmother, spoke for the first time, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd held this family together for 60 years. Sit down, dear. I sank back into my chair, feeling smaller than I had even when Richard was calling me worthless. At least then I'd had righteous anger to fuel me. Now I just felt sick. Richard, Grandma Morrison continued, you sit down too. Both of you, stop pointing fingers for 1 minute. Richard looked like he wanted to argue, but even he wouldn't cross his mother. He slumped back into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 62 years. Now, Grandma Morrison folded her hands carefully in her lap. Emma, how long have you known about the gambling? 3 weeks, I whispered. Maybe a month. I saw the casino emails by accident when I was using Jake's laptop. And why didn't you tell Jake immediately? I glanced at my husband, who was staring at the tablecloth like it held the secrets of the universe. I wasn't sure what I was seeing at first. And then when I tried to bring it up, Jake said his father's business wasn't my concern. Jake's head snapped up. When did you try to bring it up? 2 weeks ago. I asked if your dad was having financial problems, and you said I was being paranoid because I didn't understand how wealthy people managed money. The hurt in my voice was unmistakable. You made me feel stupid for even asking. That's not what I meant. But that's what you said, I cut him off. Just like tonight, when your father spent 20 minutes telling everyone how worthless I am, and you said nothing. Grandma Morrison held up her hand. Jake, is that true? Did your father speak to Emma that way? Jake's silence was answer enough. I see. Her voice was disapproving. And Richard, how much money are we actually talking about? Total. Richard shifted uncomfortably. It's hard to say exactly. Try, David said coldly. From the business accounts, maybe 400,000. But like I said, it's all temporary. I have a plan too. 400,000? Linda's voice was barely audible. You told me 60,000. Then 200. Now 400? There might be some personal accounts too, Richard admitted. Credit cards, the home equity line, some of the investment funds. The color drained from Linda's face. How much, Richard? Everything. How much of our life did you gamble away? The pause felt eternal. Around the table, I could hear people breathing, the clink of ice settling in water glasses, someone's phone buzzing ignored in their purse. Maybe 700,000 total, Richard finally whispered. Linda made a sound like she'd been punched. Several family members gasped audibly. David put his head in his hands. Jesus Christ, Richard, Jake said. 700,000? But I have a plan. Richard's voice turned desperate again. There's this tournament in Atlantic City next weekend. High stakes, invitation only. If I could just get stake money together. Stop. Grandma Morrison's voice cut through his rambling like a blade. Richard Morrison, you will not gamble another penny of this family's money. Is that clear? Ma, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. I understand that you've become someone I don't recognize. Her voice was sadder now, but no less firm. And I understand that this family has some very difficult decisions to make. She turned to look at me, her gray eyes sharp and assessing. Emma, what you did tonight was devastating. But necessary, I think. If you hadn't spoken up, how much more would we have lost before we found out? The question hung in the air. Richard looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. That said, she continued, the way you handled this was explosive. Perhaps there were better ways to protect yourself without causing quite so much collateral damage. I nodded miserably. I know. I couldn't take it anymore. And you shouldn't have had to, she said firmly, her gaze shifting to Jake. That's what husbands are for. The weight of her disapproval settled on Jake's shoulders like a heavy coat. Around the table, the family sat in stunned silence, trying to process the magnitude of what had just been revealed. But I had the sinking feeling that the worst was yet to come. David suddenly stood up, his face grim. I need to make some phone calls. Tonight. He looked directly at Richard. The Patterson inspection is Monday morning. If we can't produce those funds by then, they'll file a report with the state licensing board. What does that mean? Linda asked, her voice barely above a whisper. It means criminal charges, David said flatly. It means the end of Morrison Construction. 23 years building this business, Richard. 23 years. My stomach lurched. I'd wanted to hurt Richard, not destroy an entire company. David, I'm sorry, I didn't know it was this serious. Don't apologize for telling the truth, David cut me off, but his tone wasn't unkind. This isn't your fault, Emma. This is his. He pointed at Richard. But now we all have to live with the consequences. Jake's cousin Michael, who'd been silent all evening, finally spoke up. What about the other employees? My friend Danny just got hired as a project manager last month. His wife just had a baby. I know, David said, running his hands through his hair. 15 full-time employees, plus the subcontractors we work with regularly. If we lose our license. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Richard suddenly slammed his palm on the table. It doesn't have to come to that. You're all acting like this is hopeless, but I can fix this. I know people, I have connections. Your connections are bookies and casino managers, Jake's Aunt Margaret said sharply. What exactly are they going to do to help? There's this guy, Tommy Ricci, he runs high-stakes games in the city. He owes me a favor, and if I can just get into his weekend game. Are you insane? Jake exploded. Dad, you just admitted to stealing $700,000, and your solution is to gamble more? It's not gambling when you have inside information, Richard insisted. Tommy told me about this tournament, said some of the players are tourists, easy marks. Listen to yourself. Linda stood up so abruptly her chair scraped against the hardwood floor. Easy marks? 40 years of marriage, Richard, and I don't even know who you are anymore. I watched this family tear itself apart and felt a crushing weight of responsibility. Yes, Richard had brought this on himself, but I'd lit the fuse. I'd chosen the nuclear option when maybe there had been other ways to handle things. Maybe there's another solution, I said quietly, and everyone turned to look at me. The house, your house, not the beach house. Could you refinance it? Use the money to pay back the Patterson account at least? Richard's laugh was bitter. Already tried. The house is leveraged to the hilt. I took out a second mortgage 6 months ago, remember? Linda sank back into her chair. I can't believe this is happening. Jake's Uncle Tom, who worked in banking, cleared his throat. There might be some options. Personal loans, maybe selling some assets quickly. We could probably come up with enough to cover the Patterson money and avoid criminal charges. But Richard. He looked directly at his brother-in-law. You'd have to sign over all financial control to Linda or David. Complete transparency, supervised spending, the works. I'm not a child, Richard snapped. You're acting like one, Grandma Morrison said coldly. Tom's suggestion is generous given the circumstances. Sarah, who'd been unusually quiet for someone her age, suddenly looked up from her phone. Guys? We might have another problem. Everyone turned to her, and my blood ran cold when I saw the expression on her face. I wasn't recording the dinner, she said quickly, but I did post something on Instagram earlier. Just a family dinner photo, you know? But I tagged everyone, and... She held up her phone. The comments are getting weird. Someone's asking about Morrison Construction financial troubles. David went pale. Who? Who's asking? I don't recognize the account, but they seem to know details about the business. They're asking if it's true that the company is facing bankruptcy. The silence that followed was deafening. In the span of 2 hours, we'd gone from a family dinner to a potential criminal investigation to a brewing public relations nightmare. And Jake was staring at me like this was all my fault. Maybe it was. Jake, I whispered, reaching for his hand across the table. We need to talk about this privately. He pulled his hand away like I'd burned him. Privately? Like how you privately went through my family's personal information? The rejection stung worse than anything Richard had said to me. After everything that had just been revealed about his father's gambling and theft, Jake was still making me the villain. Sarah was frantically typing on her phone. I'm trying to delete the post, but people have already screenshot it. Oh God, Danny Kowalski from the Tribune just sent me a DM asking if I want to comment on the Morrison Construction story. What story? David demanded. Sarah's face went white. He says someone tipped them off about financial irregularities. They're running something tomorrow morning. The room erupted in panicked voices. Richard stood up so fast his water glass toppled over, sending ice cubes skittering across the mahogany table. This is sabotage, he declared, pointing an accusatory finger at me. You didn't just stumble across those emails. Someone's been feeding you information, haven't they? What are you talking about? I shot back, but something cold was forming in my stomach. Think about it, Richard's voice grew more confident as he found his footing. A school teacher accidentally discovers sophisticated financial fraud? Screenshots ready to go at the perfect moment? You've been planning this. Jake was studying my face intently, and I didn't like what I saw in his expression. Emma, how did you really find those emails? Because you said you were printing my medical journals, but those would be in a completely different folder than Dad's personal correspondence. My mouth went dry. The truth was messier than I'd admitted. Yes, I'd initially found the casino emails by accident, but once I realized what I was seeing, I'd deliberately gone looking for more. I'd spent hours going through Richard's digital footprint, taking screenshots, building a case. After I found the first email, I looked for more, I admitted. I thought if Richard was gambling, Jake deserved to know. So you did spy, Jake said quietly. You went through private emails deliberately. To protect you. From what? From my family? Before I could answer, Linda's phone started ringing. She glanced at the screen and her face crumpled. It's my sister Carol. She never calls this late unless. She answered with a shaky voice. Hello? We could hear Carol's voice through the speaker, loud and agitated. Linda, honey, I just saw the news alert. Is it true about Richard and the company? They're saying he embezzled money? Linda's eyes darted around the table in panic. Carol, I can't. We're at dinner. I'll call you back. But Linda, this is serious. They're talking about federal charges. My neighbor's husband works for the DA's office, and he says. Linda hung up, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped the phone. It's already out there, she whispered. Everyone's going to know. David was making his own phone calls, his voice low and urgent as he tried to reach their lawyer. Tom was frantically scribbling notes on a cocktail napkin, calculating numbers. The younger family members were huddled around Sarah's phone, watching the story unfold in real time on social media. And in the middle of it all, Jake was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before, not anger, not disappointment, but something that looked almost like disgust. You know what the worst part is, he said, his voice barely audible above the chaos. I keep thinking about what you said earlier. About not knowing who you married. My heart stopped. Jake. Because you're right. I don't know who you are. The woman I fell in love with wouldn't have done this. She wouldn't have systematically gathered evidence to destroy my family. Your family was already destroying itself, I protested, but even as I said it, I could hear how hollow it sounded. Maybe. But now everyone gets to watch it happen. The next morning, I woke up alone in our apartment. Jake had come home sometime after 2 a.m. I'd heard him moving around in the kitchen, opening and closing cabinets with unnecessary force, but he'd slept on the couch without saying a word to me. I found him at the breakfast table, still in yesterday's dress shirt, staring at his laptop screen with red-rimmed eyes. 3 empty coffee cups sat beside him like evidence of a sleepless night. The Tribune article went live at 6, he said without looking up. Front page of the business section. They have quotes from former employees, speculation about federal investigations, and a timeline of Dad's casino visits going back 8 months. My stomach dropped. Jake, I swear I didn't leak anything to the press. I know. His voice was flat, emotionless. Uncle David talked to their reporter. Apparently someone called in an anonymous tip yesterday afternoon, right around the time we were sitting down to dinner. They had details that weren't in your screenshots. I sank into the chair across from him, my mind racing. What kind of details? Specific dates, transaction amounts, even the fake vendor invoices Dad created to cover the withdrawals. Jake finally looked at me, and his eyes were bloodshot from exhaustion and stress. Someone with inside access to the company's accounting system fed them information. So you believe me? That I didn't. It doesn't matter what I believe, Jake cut me off. The damage is done either way. He turned his laptop around so I could see the screen. The headline made my blood run cold. Local construction magnate allegedly embezzles $700,000 for gambling habit. Below it was a photo of Richard at some charity gala, smiling and shaking hands with the mayor. But it was the sidebar that made me want to throw up. Family Insider exposes fraud at dinner party with a subheading that read, Daughter-in-law's public revelation leads to business collapse. They interviewed people who were there, Jake said, scrolling down to show me quotes from various family members. Cousin Michael talked about how you dramatically revealed evidence of financial crimes. Aunt Margaret described it as like watching a bomb go off at the dinner table. I covered my face with my hands. This is a nightmare. It gets worse. Jake clicked over to another tab, and I saw the Morrison Construction website with a banner across the top, temporarily closed pending legal review. David had to shut down operations this morning, Jake continued. The Patterson project called an emergency meeting, 3 other clients are threatening to pull their contracts, and the state licensing board opened a formal investigation. 15 people lost their jobs overnight. The weight of responsibility was crushing. Yes, Richard had stolen the money, but my public revelation had accelerated everything. Maybe if I'd handled it differently, found a way to address it privately, those people would still have jobs. Your mom called me 20 minutes ago, Jake said, and something in his tone made me look up sharply. My mom? Why would she? Then it hit me. Oh no. Please tell me this hasn't made it back home. Someone posted the Tribune article in the Millbrook Community Facebook group. Jake's voice was getting more strained. Your high school classmates are having a field day with Emma Collins exposes rich in-laws financial crimes. Your mother is fielding calls from people wanting to know if it's true that you married into money and then destroyed your husband's family. I felt sick. Millbrook was the kind of small town where everyone knew everyone's business, and my family had always been solidly working class. My dad was a mechanic, my mom worked at the post office. They'd been so proud when I graduated college, so excited when I married someone who would take care of me. Now they were probably getting pitying looks and whispered questions about their daughter's marriage. Jake, I need to call them. There's more. He pulled up his phone and showed me a text thread. Dad's lawyer thinks someone inside the company has been cooperating with federal investigators for months. The timing of the press leak, the detail level, the fact that they already have bank records, this isn't some random tip. I stared at the phone, trying to process what he was telling me. You think someone set us up? Used the dinner as a way to make this all come out? I think someone knew Dad's gambling was going to collapse the company anyway, and they needed a fall guy. Jake's voice was bitter. Someone who could take the blame for exposing family secrets instead of looking like they were protecting their own interests. But who would? I stopped mid-sentence as understanding dawned. David. Jake nodded grimly. He's been the company's financial officer for 6 years. He had to have known about the missing money before last night. But if he'd reported it himself, it would have looked like he was involved or negligent. Better to let Dad's dramatic daughter-in-law be the whistleblower. My hands started shaking. So he used me. He let me think I was standing up for myself, but really I was just giving him cover to report his own partner. That's what I think, yeah. The betrayal felt like a physical blow. Bad enough that I'd destroyed my relationship with Jake's family, but to find out I'd been manipulated into doing it made everything 10 times worse. What happens now? I whispered. Jake closed his laptop with more force than necessary. Now Dad will probably go to federal prison. Mom will lose the house. Uncle David will probably cut a deal with prosecutors in exchange for cooperating with their investigation. And I. He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. I have to figure out if I can forgive you for burning down my family's life. Even if I was manipulated into it? Jake paused at the kitchen doorway, his back to me. Being manipulated doesn't change what you chose to do, Emma. It just explains why the timing was so perfect. After he left for the hospital, I sat alone in our kitchen, staring at the newspaper coverage of our family's destruction, and realized that even if Jake forgave me, I wasn't sure I'd ever be able to forgive myself. The phone rang at 6:43 a.m., jolting me awake from the first real sleep I'd managed in 2 days. Jake's side of the bed was cold. He'd been pulling extra shifts at the hospital, claiming they needed him, but I knew he was just avoiding coming home. Mrs. Morrison? The voice was crisp, professional. This is Agent Sarah Chin with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. I need to speak with you about the Morrison construction case. My blood turned to ice. What? We'd like you to come in for questioning this afternoon. You're not under arrest, but given your role in exposing the alleged fraud, we have some questions about how you obtained certain evidence. After I hung up, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I tried calling Jake, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried calling my mom, but the idea of explaining federal agents to her made my chest tight. Finally, I called the one person I thought might understand. Emma? Linda's voice was hoarse, exhausted. Honey, are you okay? The FBI wants to question me, I blurted out. About the emails I found. There was a long pause. Oh, sweetheart. I was afraid this might happen. Linda, I'm so sorry. About everything. About Richard, about the way I handled dinner, about... Stop. Her voice was firm but not unkind. Emma, there's something you need to know. Something I should have told you that night. My stomach clenched. What do you mean? I knew. The words came out in a rush. About the gambling, about the money. I've known for months. I sank onto the couch, feeling like the ground was shifting beneath me. You knew? The casino emails weren't the only evidence, honey. I'd been getting calls from creditors, strange charges on our credit cards, discrepancies in our bank statements. I hired a private investigator in March. But you seemed so shocked at dinner. Because I was shocked that it had gone so far, Linda said, her voice breaking slightly. The PI told me about the business accounts, but I thought Richard was just taking small amounts. I had no idea about the Patterson money, about the real scope of it. I felt like I was drowning. So when I stood up at dinner, you said everything I'd been too scared to say for 6 months. Linda's voice was quiet now. Emma, I've been living with this secret, watching Richard lie to everyone, watching him treat you horribly, and I said nothing. You did what I should have done. But the FBI. The FBI has been investigating Morrison Construction since April, Linda continued. David's been cooperating with them since May. They have surveillance footage of Richard at 3 different casinos, wiretaps of conversations with bookies, forensic accounting going back 2 years. My head was spinning. So the dinner, my screenshots, were just the final pieces falling into place, Linda finished. Emma, you weren't the catalyst for this investigation. You were just visible when everything collapsed. I heard a car door slam outside and looked through the window to see Jake's Honda in the driveway. He was home 3 hours earlier than usual, and the grim expression on his face as he walked up our front steps told me this wasn't a social visit. Linda, I have to go. Jake's home. Emma, wait. The FBI interview, don't go alone. Get a lawyer. I can't afford a lawyer. I'll pay for one. It's the least I can do. Jake walked through the front door as I was hanging up, and the look on his face made my chest tighten with dread. We need to talk, he said, his voice carefully controlled. There's been a development. He sat down across from me, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. The hospital administration called me into a meeting this morning. Someone contacted them about my family's legal troubles. My worst fears were crystallizing. Jake, no. They're concerned about the negative publicity affecting the residency program. Apparently, having a family member under federal investigation raises questions about my character and judgment. But you didn't do anything wrong. Neither did you, technically, Jake said, but his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. But Emma, they're suggesting I might want to consider transferring to a different program. Somewhere the Morrison name won't follow me. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Jake had been working toward this residency for years. Moving would mean starting over, losing the connections he'd built, potentially adding years to his training. This is all my fault, I whispered. Is it? Jake's voice was sharp now, angry in a way I'd rarely heard from him. Because I'm starting to think there's a lot more to this story than you told me. I looked up to find him staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before, not hurt, not disappointment, but suspicion. The FBI wants to question me this afternoon, I said quietly. Jake's face went pale. Jesus, Emma. What aren't you telling me? Jake's question hung in the air like a blade. What wasn't I telling him? Where did I even begin? The private investigator, I said finally. Your mom hired one in March. She's known about your father's gambling for months. Jake's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and something that looked almost like relief. Mom knew? Then why didn't she? Because she was scared, I interrupted. Just like you were scared to stand up to your father at dinner. Just like your whole family has been scared of Richard for years. That's not the same thing. Isn't it? I stood up, pacing to the window. Your mother had actual evidence, Jake. Professional surveillance, financial records, proof of everything. But she stayed quiet because it was easier than facing the truth about who Richard really is. Jake was quiet for a long moment. What else? David's been cooperating with the FBI since May. The investigation was already happening, with or without my dinner table revelation. I didn't expose your father, Jake. I just made it public. But the screenshots, the emails, were real. Everything I said was true. But I wasn't some detective who uncovered a conspiracy. I was just the only person who finally got angry enough to say it out loud. Jake rubbed his face with both hands. God, Emma. Do you realize what this means? If Mom knew, if David knew, if there was already an investigation. It means your family let me be the villain, I finished. It was easier to blame the outsider than deal with the fact that you all enabled Richard for years. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. FBI interview moved to 2 p.m. Agent Chen will meet you at Federal Building downtown. Bring identification. I need a lawyer, I said, showing Jake the text. Your mom offered to pay for one, but... No. Jake's voice was sharp. Absolutely not. We're not taking money from my family for this. Then what do you suggest? Because I can't afford a federal criminal defense attorney on a teacher's salary. Jake was quiet for a moment, then pulled out his phone. My attending physician, Dr. Rodriguez, her husband is a defense lawyer. Maybe he knows someone who does pro bono work. While Jake made calls, I sat on our couch and tried to process everything that had happened in the past 48 hours. 2 days ago, my biggest problem was my father-in-law's dinner table cruelty. Now I was facing federal questioning, Jake's career was in jeopardy, and our marriage felt like it was hanging by a thread. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd wanted Richard to face consequences for his behavior, and he was about to face the biggest consequences of his life. But somehow, I was the one sitting here feeling like a criminal. Emma. Jake sat back down, his expression serious. Dr. Rodriguez gave me a name. Marcus Webb, downtown firm, he handles federal cases. But before you call him, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. My stomach clenched. Okay. When you found those emails, when you decided to gather evidence against my father, was any part of you hoping this would happen? That his life would implode? The question hit me like a slap. Because the honest answer was yes. In my darkest moments, when Richard was calling me worthless or making jokes about my cheap clothes, I had fantasized about him being exposed, humiliated, brought down to earth. But I'd never imagined it would take everyone else down with him. Yes, I whispered. I wanted him to face consequences. I wanted him to feel as small as he made me feel. Jake nodded slowly, like he'd expected that answer. And now that he is? I looked at my husband, really looked at him. The exhaustion in his eyes, the way his shoulders slumped with the weight of everything that had happened. Now I feel like a monster. Jake's phone rang before I could say anything else. He glanced at the screen and his face went ashen. It's Uncle David. He answered on speaker. David, what's wrong now? Jake, thank God. Listen, I need to warn you both about something. David's voice was strained, urgent. I just got off the phone with the FBI, and they're asking very specific questions about Emma. My blood turned to ice. What kind of questions? They want to know about your financial situation, whether you've received any payments in the last 6 months, whether you've been in contact with any journalists or investigators. Jake and I stared at each other. David, what are you saying? They think someone paid Emma to expose Richard. They think this whole thing was orchestrated to manipulate stock prices or create a business opportunity for competitors. That's insane, I breathed. I'm a teacher. I don't even know what Morrison Construction stock is worth. It doesn't matter what's true, David continued. What matters is they're building a conspiracy case, and Emma's at the center of it. They have records of someone transferring money into an account with her name on it. The room started spinning. What money? What account? I don't know the details, but Jake, you need to get her a lawyer. Today. Before that interview. After David hung up, Jake and I sat in stunned silence. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Emma, is there any account you've forgotten about? Any money that's come in recently that might look suspicious? I racked my brain, trying to think. Then it hit me like lightning. The substitute teaching payments. The district switched to a new payroll system last month. They've been depositing substitute pay into a different account than my regular salary. Jake's eyes widened. How much money are we talking about? Maybe $3,000 over the past 6 weeks? I picked up extra shifts because I was saving up for your graduation gift. $3,000 in cash deposits right before you exposed Dad, Jake said slowly. Emma, to an outside investigator, that looks like someone paid me to destroy your family. The realization made me nauseous. Oh God, Jake. They think I did this for money. My phone buzzed with another text, this one from my mom. Honey, there's a man here asking questions about you. Says he's from some kind of federal agency. Should I talk to him? They're questioning my parents, I said, showing Jake the text. They're investigating my whole family. Jake stood up abruptly, pacing to the kitchen and back. This is insane. You're not some criminal mastermind. You teach 2nd grade, for Christ's sake. But can you prove that? Can we prove I'm just the teacher who got fed up with being insulted? Jake stopped pacing, his face grave. The FBI doesn't investigate small-time domestic disputes, Emma. If they're this deep into your background, they think this goes way beyond family drama. The weight of it all crashed down on me. Not only had I destroyed Jake's family, but now I was potentially facing federal charges for something I didn't even understand. What if we can't prove my innocence? I asked, my voice barely audible. Jake looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in his expression. Not anger, not disappointment, but something that looked almost like fear. Then we're both going to find out just how much worse this can get. As if summoned by his words, there was a sharp knock at our front door. Through the window, I could see 2 people in dark suits standing on our porch. The FBI had come to us. The knock came again, more insistent this time. Jake and I looked at each other, both frozen in place like deer caught in headlights. Should we answer it? I whispered, though I knew how ridiculous that sounded. You can't just ignore the FBI. Jake straightened his shoulders, trying to project a confidence I could tell he didn't feel. Let me handle this. He opened the door to reveal 2 agents, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and graying hair, and a younger man with a kind of bland, forgettable face that probably served him well in investigations. Mr. Morrison? I'm Agent Chen, this is Agent Williams. We'd like to speak with your wife. Actually, Jake said, his voice steadier than I expected, we were just about to call a lawyer. Agent Chen smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. That's certainly you're right. But we're not here to arrest anyone. We just have some follow-up questions that might clear up some confusion. What kind of confusion? I found myself asking, stepping up behind Jake. Agent Williams consulted his notepad. Mrs. Morrison, are you familiar with a company called Riverside Development Group? The name meant nothing to me. No, I've never heard of them. They're a commercial real estate firm based in Chicago, Agent Chen explained. They've been trying to acquire several properties in this area, including the land where Morrison Construction's main warehouse sits. I felt Jake tense beside me. What does that have to do with Emma? 3 days ago, Riverside Development submitted a formal bid to purchase the Morrison Construction property at significantly below market value, Agent Williams continued. They cited ongoing financial irregularities and pending legal issues as justification for the lowball offer. My stomach dropped. You think I'm working with them? We think someone gave them very detailed inside information about Morrison Construction's financial problems, Agent Chin said. Information that wouldn't have been publicly available until after your revelation at the family dinner. Jake stepped forward, his voice getting heated. That's impossible. Emma doesn't know anything about real estate or business acquisitions. She teaches 7-year-olds how to read. Mr. Morrison, we've been investigating financial crimes for a combined 30 years, Agent Williams said. We've learned that the most effective criminal conspiracies often use people who appear to be completely innocent. Criminal conspiracy? I felt like I was going to be sick. You think I'm part of some criminal conspiracy? Agent Chin pulled out her phone and showed me a screenshot. This is a text message sent from your phone number to a Chicago area code on the morning after the family dinner. It says, it's done. Morrison Construction will be off the market within a week. I stared at the screen in absolute horror. I never sent that text. I don't even know any Chicago phone numbers. The message was sent at 7:23 a.m., Agent Williams noted. Can you account for your whereabouts at that time? I was here, I said, looking desperately at Jake. I was in the kitchen, you saw me. We were talking about the newspaper article. But Jake's expression was troubled. Emma, you went upstairs to shower around 7. I was on a call with Uncle David. I don't actually know exactly what you were doing. The doubt in his voice was like a knife to my chest. Jake, you can't seriously think. Mrs. Morrison, Agent Chin interrupted. Is it possible someone else had access to your phone that morning? I tried to think back. The morning after the dinner was a blur of panic and phone calls and trying to process what had happened. I don't know. My phone was charging on the kitchen counter. Anyone could have. Anyone in your household, Agent Williams clarified. Which would be you and your husband. The implication hung in the air like poison. They thought Jake was involved too. This is insane, Jake said, his voice rising. You think my wife and I orchestrated some elaborate scheme to destroy my own family's business so that some random real estate company could buy their property? Stranger things have happened, Agent Chin said mildly. Especially when there's significant money involved. The Riverside deal would net someone a substantial finder's fee. How substantial? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. $250,000. Jake made a choking sound. $250,000? For what? For providing inside information that would force Morrison Construction into a distressed sale, Agent Williams explained. Information about financial irregularities, pending investigations, family conflicts that could disrupt business operations. I felt the walls closing in around me. But I didn't know any of that would happen. I just wanted Richard to stop humiliating me. Or, Agent Chin suggested, you knew exactly what would happen, because someone walked you through the plan step by step. The agents exchanged a look, and Agent Williams closed his notepad. Mrs. Morrison, we strongly suggest you retain legal counsel before our scheduled interview this afternoon. Things are going to get much more complicated very quickly. After they left, Jake and I stood in our living room in stunned silence. Finally, he spoke, his voice hollow. Emma, I need you to tell me the truth. All of it. Is there anything at all, that you haven't told me about that night or what led up to it? I looked at my husband, the man I thought would always believe in me, always have my back, and saw doubt clouding his eyes. After everything Richard had put me through, after all the times Jake had failed to defend me, he was still questioning whether I was telling the truth. The only thing I haven't told you, I said quietly, is that I'm starting to wonder if this marriage was a mistake from the beginning. Jake's face went white, but before he could respond, my phone buzzed with yet another text from an unknown number. Stop talking to the FBI. You're in more danger than you know. Trust no one, especially family. Meet me at Riverside Park, South Entrance, 6 p.m. Come alone. A friend. I showed the text to Jake, and watched what was left of our trust completely shatter. The text message felt like a bomb going off in our living room. Jake stared at my phone screen, his face cycling through disbelief, anger, and something that looked dangerously close to betrayal. A friend? His voice was deadly quiet. What friend, Emma? What friend knows about FBI investigations and tells you not to trust family? I have no idea, I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I could hear how unconvincing they sounded. Jake, I swear I don't know who sent this. He started pacing, running his hands through his hair in the way he did when he was trying to solve an impossible medical case. This is insane. Someone's been manipulating this whole situation from the beginning, and somehow you're right in the middle of it. My phone buzzed again. Another message from the same unknown number. The FBI is building a case against you. The real criminals are using you as a scapegoat. 6 p.m. Your only chance to learn the truth. Don't even think about it, Jake said before I could speak. You are not meeting some anonymous contact in a park. That's exactly what someone does right before they disappear forever. But what if they're right? What if someone is setting me up? Jake stopped pacing and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Emma, 3 days ago you were an elementary school teacher married to a medical resident. Now you're potentially involved in a federal conspiracy case with mysterious contacts sending you cryptic messages. Does any of this seem normal to you? Before I could answer, our landline started ringing. Jake picked it up, and I watched his face go pale as he listened. Mom? His voice cracked slightly. Slow down, I can't understand what you're saying. I could hear Linda's voice through the receiver, high-pitched and panicked, but couldn't make out the words. What do you mean Dad's gone? Jake asked, and my blood turned to ice. He listened for another moment, then hung up without saying goodbye. Dad never came home last night. Mom found a note this morning saying he was going to fix everything and not to look for him. Oh God, I whispered. You don't think he would? I don't know what to think anymore, Jake cut me off. But Mom's getting calls from reporters asking if it's true that he fled the country to avoid prosecution. The room felt like it was spinning. Everything was spiraling so far out of control that I couldn't even remember what normal felt like anymore. There's more, Jake continued, his voice getting more strained. Someone leaked Dad's exact travel itinerary to the press. They know he took a 6 a.m. flight to Las Vegas this morning. They know which casino he's staying at. They know he withdrew the maximum cash advance from 4 different credit cards at the airport. How could they possibly know all that unless someone's been tracking his every move for weeks, Jake finished. Someone with access to his financial accounts, his travel bookings, maybe even his phone records. We stared at each other as the implications sank in. Whoever was orchestrating this had resources and access that went way beyond anything a small-time gambling addiction could explain. My phone buzzed with a third message. Richard's in Vegas because someone told him about a sure-thing poker game. It's a trap. They're going to make sure he loses everything and can never pay anyone back. Meet me at 6 or watch your father-in-law destroy himself on national television. They're using Richard too, I said, showing Jake the message. Someone's been pulling all the strings, manipulating everyone. Jake read the text, and for the first time since this nightmare began, his expression softened slightly. Emma, if this is real, if someone really is orchestrating all of this, then going to that park might be the only way to find out who's been destroying our family, I finished. But even as I said it, I knew that meeting a mysterious contact alone was probably the worst decision I could make. The question was, did I have any choice left? The decision to meet the anonymous contact felt like jumping off a cliff, but staying home felt like waiting to be buried alive. Jake and I spent the next hour in tense silence, both of us checking our phones obsessively as more pieces of our family's destruction played out in real time. At 5:30, I made my choice. I'm going, I announced, grabbing my purse and keys. Emma, no. Jake blocked the doorway. This is exactly what someone wants you to do. Walk into an isolated location with no witnesses. And if I don't go, what happens? I wait here while your father gambles away his last chance at redemption on live television? While the FBI builds a conspiracy case against me that I can't defend because I don't understand it myself? Jake's phone rang before he could argue further. He answered it, his face going ashen as he listened. That was Uncle David, he said after hanging up. The FBI just searched Morrison Construction's offices. They seized all the computers, all the financial records, everything. And they found something. My heart stopped. What did they find? A hidden email account that Dad apparently used to communicate with someone about his gambling debts. The last email was sent yesterday morning, right after our dinner. It says he's going to Vegas to settle accounts permanently with someone named Victor Kozlov. The name meant nothing to me, but Jake's expression suggested it should. Who's Victor Kozlov? I have no idea, but Uncle David looked him up. He's connected to some very serious people in Chicago. The kind of people who don't forgive gambling debts. I felt the last piece of solid ground disappear beneath my feet. So your father isn't just running away from federal charges. He's running toward dangerous criminals. And someone manipulated him into doing exactly that, Jake said grimly. Someone who's been feeding information to the FBI, to the press, and apparently to organized crime figures. My phone buzzed, 5 minutes. South entrance. Come alone or Richard Morrison dies tonight in Las Vegas. The blood drained from my face as I showed Jake the message. For a moment, we just stared at each other, both understanding that we'd crossed into territory far more dangerous than family drama or even federal fraud charges. I have to go, I whispered. Then I'm going with you. The message said come alone. I don't care what the message said. Jake grabbed his jacket, his jaw set with determination. Someone's been playing games with our family for months. Someone's using you as a pawn in something that could get my father killed. I'm not letting you walk into that alone. We drove to Riverside Park in silence, both of us scanning the area for anything suspicious. The south entrance was nearly deserted at 6 p.m. on a Tuesday evening, just a few joggers and dog walkers taking advantage of the cooler weather. At exactly 6 o'clock, a woman approached our car. She was in her 50s, professionally dressed, with a kind of confident bearing that suggested she was used to being in control of situations. She tapped on my window and gestured for me to roll it down. Emma Morrison? Her voice was crisp, businesslike. I'm Detective Patricia Walsh, Chicago PD Financial Crimes Unit. I've been investigating the Riverside Development connection for 6 months. My mouth fell open. You're a cop? Undercover, she confirmed. And you've stumbled into the middle of the biggest real estate fraud case Illinois has seen in a decade. Your father-in-law isn't just a gambling addict, Mrs. Morrison. He's been laundering money for Victor Kozlov's organization through Morrison Construction for over 2 years. The world tilted sideways. Jake made a choking sound from the driver's seat. That's impossible, I managed. He's just a contractor who got in over his head with casino debts. Detective Walsh smiled grimly. That's exactly what someone wanted you to think. And that's exactly why you're in so much danger right now. Detective Walsh pulled out a thick manila folder and handed it to Jake through the car window. Everything you need to know is in there, she said. Richard Morrison has been using Morrison Construction as a front to launder money for Kozlov's organization since 2019. The gambling addiction was real, but it started as a way to explain large cash transactions. When he got in too deep and started skimming from the laundered money to cover his own losses, Kozlov's people decided he needed to be eliminated. I felt like I was drowning. So the dinner, my screenshots, were the perfect cover story, Walsh continued. Kozlov's inside man at Morrison Construction, someone who's been feeding information to make this look like a family dispute gone wrong, used your confrontation to accelerate the timeline. They needed Richard discredited and on the run before he could cut a deal with federal prosecutors. Jake was frantically flipping through documents in the folder. Emma, look at this. Bank records going back 3 years. Shell company transactions. Your father-in-law was moving millions of dollars through the business. The person manipulating everything, I said, the pieces finally clicking into place. It's David, isn't it? Walsh nodded approvingly. David Morrison has been Kozlov's inside man from the beginning. He's the one who got Richard involved in the laundering scheme, and he's the one who's been feeding information to investigators to make sure his brother-in-law takes the fall for everything. My phone buzzed with another message from David. Emma, where are you? The FBI wants to talk to both you and Jake immediately. They have new evidence about the conspiracy charges. He's still trying to manipulate us, I said, showing Walsh the text. Actually, he's panicking, she replied. Because Viktor Kozlov just got arrested at O'Hare Airport trying to board a flight to Moscow. Our investigation is wrapping up, which means David's running out of time to pin everything on Richard. Jake looked up from the documents, his face pale but determined. What happens now? Is my dad safe? Richard never made it to Las Vegas, Walsh said with a slight smile. We intercepted him at McCarran Airport and took him into protective custody. He's been cooperating with our investigation since this morning, providing details about the money laundering operation in exchange for witness protection. Relief flooded through me so powerfully that I started crying. So he's alive. He's safe. And once David realizes Richard isn't going to be silenced, he'll probably try to run too, Walsh continued. Which is why we need you both to come with me right now. You're going to help us catch him in the act of trying to destroy evidence. An hour later, Jake and I sat in an FBI surveillance van outside Morrison Construction's offices, watching David frantically shred documents while wearing a wire that Detective Walsh had convinced him I was wearing during our meeting at the park. I can't believe Uncle David was behind everything, Jake said, his voice hollow as we watched federal agents surround the building. The gambling addiction, the dinner confrontation, even the press leaks, David orchestrated all of it to make sure Richard looked like the mastermind while David played the innocent partner, Walsh explained through our headsets. As we watched David get led away in handcuffs, Jake reached over and took my hand. Emma, I owe you an apology, he said quietly. You were right to expose Dad's problems at dinner. If you hadn't forced everything into the open, we never would have discovered the money laundering. David would have let Dad take the fall for everything while actual criminals walked free. I squeezed his hand, feeling like we were finally on the same side again. I still think there were better ways to handle it than a public confrontation. Maybe. But sometimes the only way to solve a problem is to make it impossible to ignore. 6 months later, Richard Morrison was sentenced to 18 months in minimum security prison and entered witness protection. David Morrison received 12 years for money laundering and racketeering. Morrison Construction was sold to pay restitution to the clients whose money had been stolen. And Jake and I learned that sometimes the worst family dinners lead to the most important conversations about who we really are and what we're willing to fight for. The FBI dropped all charges against me, of course. But more importantly, Jake and I rebuilt our marriage on a foundation of actually standing up for each other instead of just hoping problems would solve themselves. As it turns out, being willing to burn everything down sometimes means you can finally build something worth keeping. Update, thanks for all the comments. Jake finished his residency and we moved to Oregon for his fellowship. We have dinner with Linda every Sunday via video call. Richard writes us letters from witness protection that are surprisingly thoughtful and include a lot of apologies. We're doing okay, ***. And yes, I'm still teaching elementary school. Turns out accidentally helping the FBI bust a money laundering operation looks great on a resume, ***.